Even at teachers,
Look at her mom.
trying to be honest.
I've been looking for that for the last 5 minutes.
That's yours. Yeah.
All right, let's see what kind of person that we came up with. When you think of living a life that is worthy to the calling that God has given us, that the Lord has given us, what kind of person? Sarah, start us off.
Jesus.
All right.
No, but really, we did get farther into that. But wait, there's more.
All right. Jesus. Let's move on. All right. What qualities and characteristics specifically, Sarah, that what you might pull out about Jesus?
We talked mostly about his humility.
Humility. Okay. Excellent. Okay. Let's go back here to this table back here. John, are you the rep?
Oh, well, we just said it.
Jonna?
Oh, John.
No, go ahead.
No, go ahead, John.
I was pointing at both of you. Go, Jonna.
Wait, I heard the no.
Yes, go, Jonna. Jonna, go ahead.
No, we just said that, like anybody that goes out there to help others, doesn't help others.
Okay. All right, Jonna is saying that their table came up with anybody that is out there to help others.
Because it says that in like,
Yeah.
Brett talked about like growing up, that if there was a fire, there's anything, it didn't matter, everybody came in to help.
Okay. All right. Helping. No matter what's going on, there's help out there. Okay. This table here. Cheryl?
A sweet person.
Sweet.
Sweet meaning that like considerate of others and
Okay.
kind and
Okay.
self-sacrificing and
Okay. Self-sacrificing. Okay. Good. All right. Worthy of the calling. Over here.
we put Gary.
Yep.
Yeah. Right.
That's it, right there. I don't know why he did everything.
I don't know how much. I don't know how much that's going to cost me, but I am sweating it right now.
We put down the fruits of the spirit.
Okay, fruit of the spirit. Okay.
People who exemplify those.
Okay. Good. Okay. Well, we all kind of get these expectations, these ideas, and Sarah brought us back to the reality that Paul is going to bring us back to, and that is you didn't learn Christ in this particular way, as I think Chris pointed out in our lesson today in the sermon. That once you know who you are, you now live, okay, in a certain way. And of course, our standard is Jesus. But what we want to do, go to Ephesians chapter 4, right? Ephesians chapter 4. Now remember what we've thought about so far, right? That chapter 1, all the blessings. This is the blessed life that we're living. This is the blessed life. And so he talks about what God has done. And so when we understand who God is and what he has done and who he claims us to be, right? Then as Chris was saying today, now we move from that point forward. And so then what Paul talks about is that one of the things that God sees that we have a lot harder time seeing is one. He sees all of us in that state of being loved. Unity, right? Humanity. And so Jesus came to break down the barriers that keep that from happening. All right? So that's what he's been talking about. Is that there's not Jew and Gentile. And in the Galatians he says what? There's not male and female. There's not barbarian. Okay? No, there's not divisions. God even sees a bigger picture than we tend to see. Right? So when we start chapter 4, he says, therefore. What does it therefore mean?
Stop
what
and
it's
see
there
what
for.
it's there
Stop and see what it's there for. All right? It's very good. So we got to go back. Okay? So now that we know that this is the mission of Christ, this is what Paul has given himself to, this is what the calling is. All right? I, the prisoner of the Lord, implore you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling with which you have been called. All right? And this word worthy, just a side note real quick, is from the Greek God's word. And so it has to do with who are you claiming that you follow? Who is it that has put their mark on you, if you will? And so he is saying that and that. So now look at what he says. Okay? With all humility and gentleness, with patience, showing tolerance for one another in love, being diligent to preserve the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. So there is one body, there's one Spirit. There's also you were called in one hope of your calling. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is over all and through all and in all. But to each of you grace was given according to the measure of Christ's gift. Therefore it says. And then we'll get to the therefore it says. All right? Well, let's just pause and say, okay, wow. Okay? We got to see what that therefore is there. Therefore, God sees this bigger. He sees this unity picture. And we have been called into this unity reality. Okay? We don't create the unity. We do what? Maintain the unity. We make every effort to maintain what has already been established. Right? And so he goes on to say, and of course we argue about, well, this one means this. One God has to be like this, or one Lord. And so we even take the ones and do what with them? Divide. Okay? And so what Paul is trying to say is, no, this is a reality to be maintained. God already sees it this way. One, okay? And so he goes through those ones, and we don't have to spend any time in those. We're just looking at them right now to say they exist. And we can deal with it, and we can talk through those and think about those, but what I come up with that means one baptism, and what I come up with baptism does not create the unity. And so if it goes that way, how does it have to work? What I believe about baptism must be what Anna Jane believes about baptism in order for unity to actually exist. What Paul is saying is, no matter what she believes about baptism, what I believe about baptism, what is there? There's one baptism. Okay? And so therefore, that already exists. So now then I'm trying to maintain that. I'm making every effort. Well, what in the world, what kind of person can maintain that kind of unity? I know how to maintain the kind of unity with Anna Jane if she'll believe like me. All right? And act like me. And confirm the doctrines, okay, that I want. I know how to do that one. So now let's go back and look at the person that is worthy of the calling. All right? And ask yourself, okay, and some has already pointed out with this, okay? So with all this call, what? All that you can muster up, in other words, or all that God has, or as Sarah said, as Jesus has. All right? All humility and gentleness, with patience, showing tolerance for one another in love. Now you're being diligent to maintain the unity that already exists, okay? Or to preserve it, to keep it going, to keep the reality of it real, okay? So let's just pause and ask ourselves, and then Chris is going to come back and talk about this descending and ascending and all of that.
The weird part.
From Psalm, and see if how Paul thinks that works into it. But we've all been given these gifts. So here's what we'd like for you to just explore a little bit. All right? What in your own life, okay? What in your own life is one of these that you would say, I think that I need more of that one, and this is why. In effect, if the unity is going to be maintained just by me, I'm going to need more humility, gentleness, patience, tolerance. Which one of those do you think, and just why? So let's just discuss that a little bit, just to share in an open way where we are in this, because we all know it's very, very difficult. to maintain. All right, share that for a quick minute, and we'll come back with an answer, and then we'll get to Chris.
We won't necessarily make everybody say, "Here's my deepest struggle right now,"
No.
with the whole group, but have a little chat with the group.
Oh, baby.
Is that where we're going?
She has it
We got one more time. Bear with others, silent.
I mean, you said sorry to.
Yeah.
They push out the right answer and someone else doesn't. No answer. Yeah. Okay, but back to the question.
Right, yeah.
All right, I hate to cut off this good conversation that you all are having. Like I said, we're not going to make you share these, but I know humility, patience, that's not the easiest thing. All right, well, let's come back. Obviously, I don't need humility. My mug confirmed I'm the world's greatest preacher.
Have you met everyone? You can buy it for me. Let me take that picture and send it to Greta.
Well said, Sarah. Okay, where's the humility in that photo?
I didn't buy it myself. So.
Is that going on with Facebook?
No. All right. So yeah, and we can say a lot more about all these things. You know, Gary's had, tolerating one another. Mine has bearing with one another, which I like. Just have to put up with people, which I don't want to do, right? I want them on board with me. If you think about oneness, it makes me think of the song by U2. It's called One. And the line in that song says, we get to carry each other, right? Not that we have to carry each other, we get to carry each other. And it's a burden, and a lot of times we don't want to, but that's what we do. It is a blessing to carry others, right? We're one, but we're not the same is also what they say, right? There's still differences, but those differences don't have to create division unless we let it. All right, now like Gary said, we're going to look real quick at verses 7 to 9 because he's doing something where he's going to start talking about gifts that contribute towards this unity, but it goes in an interesting direction. So starting in verse 7, he says, but each of us was given grace according to the measure of Christ's gift. Therefore it is said, when he ascended on high, he made captivity itself a captive, he gave gifts to his people. But when it says he ascended, what does it mean that he also descended into the lower parts of the earth? He who descended is the same one who ascended far above all the heavens, so he might fill all things. Okay, so we're moving towards, we are one body, but within this body, there's a diversity of gifts in addition to other things. So this kind of goes on a digression here, where he's talking about Christ. He's quoting the Psalm, he ascended on high and gave gifts, but if he ascended to heaven, that means he also had descended to the earth or below the earth. And so it kind of points to this question that some have had of what was Jesus doing in between his death and his resurrection? Where was he? Was he just dead, or was there more to it? So there is a tradition that we see here and in the early church, pretty almost immediately after the time of the New Testament that talks about Jesus descending into Hades, the place of the dead. Some refer to this as the harrowing of hell, which is a fun phrase. 1 Peter 3:19 also seems to point towards this as him preaching to imprisoned spirits. Right? So it sounds really weird, but the point is, it's Jesus going to when he is died, he goes to the place of the dead in order to free them. Right? Sometimes in art, it's depicted as Jesus pulling Adam and Eve out of the grave because they represent humanity. Just the idea of, right, if Christ went to the place of the dead, do you think he's going to leave humanity there too? Or is he going to bless us? And, we're not going to get into, was that a historical reality? Is that a metaphorical way of talking about Christ's work in salvation? However you take it, it's still true that Christ defeats the power of death, and that's not just for him. That is for us. And that's what he's getting at here, that because he did that in defeating death, he can also bless us. As he said earlier in the letter, we were dead in our sins, but now we are made alive. And now that we're alive, we are gifted through the Spirit so that we can bless the world around us, other people around us. And this is the way that he says in verse 10 that Christ, maybe slower than we want, but Christ is filling all things, heaven, earth, under the earth. There is no realm where Christ is not Lord and extending that lordship. But it's not just him, it happens through us. And maybe that's part of the reason that it's taking so long. So I'll read the next part, and then Gary and I will just kind of tag team as he starts talking about these gifts that enable us to grow and to be unified. And the gifts that he gave were that some would be apostles, some prophets, some evangelists, some pastors and teachers, to equip the saints for the work of ministry, for building up the body of Christ, until all of us come to the unity of the faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God, to maturity, to the measure of the full stature of Christ. We must no longer be children, tossed to and fro and blown about by every wind of doctrine, by people's trickery, by their craftiness and deceitful scheming, but speaking the truth in love, we must grow up in every way into him who is the head, into Christ, from whom the whole body, joined and knit together by every ligament with which it is equipped, as each part is working properly, promotes the body's growth in building itself up in love. So, Gary, you want to come and talk about that?
All right, we'll kick it off here. Okay, notice first of all that he says, okay, here's what we're doing, right? We're trying to make every effort to maintain the unity that already exists. And so he says, Christ hasn't left us alone in this. He has come down. He is a part of this. He has given us the power to do that. And now he has gifted us. And so we now have gifts. And so then he moves into this reality that we are gifted with these certain, okay, if you will, these certain people. Okay? And one of the things that has happened that Chris and I have noticed is that what we have a tendency to do is we have a tendency to organize ourselves, and it becomes very structured. And so then it becomes a hierarchy, and the church becomes this organization. And so then anytime you read anything, you see organizational structure and hierarchy. So Paul puts them in an order that would say, this is the highest, this is the next, this is the next, this is the next, this is the next. And so we now create titles and positions. Okay? The apostles. And then after the apostles came the prophets. And then after the prophets came the... And so we go through that list. But the thing that we note here is, and I've said this in a class before, and I think in a sermon, these are all lowercase. There's no uppercase apostle, capital A. Prophet, okay? It starts the sentence, but it's not the uppercase of the reality of the. So what are we saying? Christ has given us these people that have messages from God. Christ has given us these that have been sent to do that. That's the apostles, the prophets. They have a message from God. And then as he keeps going on down there's the good news tellers that this is all real. There are those that look after. There's the pastors in any given situation. And there are the teachers, those that keep pulling us back to the instructional reality of this. Okay? So what we're trying to do is I think that Paul is not seeing the hierarchically, is that a word? Structure of the church. Adam says no, it is not. and so it's not, he's not trying to see the structure of the church. He's trying to get us to see that God is working so that we can maintain the unity. And so we have a message from God here, and we have a message from God here, and we have a message from God here. And so that we're trying to work in all of those different gifts. These are gifts that have been given to us specifically for what? The equipping. So that we will be those holy ones, saints, okay, of what? Building up the body of Christ. And so whatever we want to think, even if we put a capital letter on it, if this prophet is not working to build up the body into the likeness of Christ, right? He's trying to define this, it seems like. And so we come back to this reality of these kind of things. You have a neat quote. You have that? Okay. But when it comes to leadership, we think of leadership in these big words. But if leadership is this influential reality, then all of a sudden now we have, who could be the prophet here at your table? Whoever brought that message just now? You know, Sarah over here says, well, the right answer is Jesus, but what does that mean? It's humility. So all of a sudden now, inside of that, we have been gifted. That's what Paul seems to be saying, that we're trying to work together to build ourselves up in this. Let me be quiet.
All right. Thanks. Yeah, so it starts with the giftedness, not just let's assign titles, it's their actions, their activities. And yet at the same time, the church now and through history has recognized it makes sense to have certain people that are in those positions. But I think what we're trying to say is we want to be careful to not say only these special people have these gifts or can do these things. But there's a place for thinking about how do we lead, how do we grow and be equipped, as he says here, grow into the fullness of the body of Christ. But to think about what does that actually look like in the church? And so I have a quote here from a book about leadership called Canoeing the Mountains, which the title, like, well, you can't canoe in a mountain. He's using the metaphor of Lewis and Clark when they were going across the country, and they expected that they brought canoes because they thought they would be able to just kind of sail once they got over Appalachians, I think, just take rivers all the way, but instead they found the Rocky Mountains. And so it was a little bit harder journey. So it's kind of going through unexpected territory, which is kind of how the church is, right? He wrote this book before the pandemic, so how much more so? Here's what he says about leadership. Leadership is disappointing your own people at a rate they can absorb. Disappoint people too much and they'll give up on you, stop following you, may even turn on you. Don't disappoint them enough and you'll never lead them anywhere. Leadership isn't so much skillfully helping a group accomplish what they want to do. That is management. Leadership is taking people where they need to go and yet resist going. So there's a sense of if we're being led by the Spirit, it's going to take us places we'd rather not go. If we were going there on our own, we wouldn't need leaders. And so, again, for those that are in these positions, that's something we need to think about. But it has to be done with humility. One of the things that he emphasized here. But know that finding God's path, finding the way towards unity, towards growth, it's not always going to be what we expect. It's not always going to be easy. And we have to wrestle with those disappointments of the world that we're in as we're moving forward. So as we're wrapping up, it's what can we see that is healthy or unhealthy? I think that's what I take away from 14 and verse 14, right? There are things that are going to help us, that aren't going to help us to grow, that'll grow us in the wrong ways. And so we need people who have the insight to see that. And we do that by speaking the truth in love. Now we're about out of time, but I know that's a phrase that is helpful, but can also be abused. If you emphasize the speaking the truth in love, right? Maybe you've had that experience where someone came to you like, I need to tell you the truth. And they're saying that, yeah, they're going to say this is done in love, but you get the feeling there's not a lot of love there, right? Humility, just going to emphasize that again. Is love the focus, or truth as you see it the focus? Do you always have a whole grasp on the truth? That's a big place where we all definitely need humility. But he ends here with the metaphor that I think I've used before of the bobblehead Jesus. Right? Jesus is the head. He is fully mature. We're the body that's still growing. And so it looks a little odd. But that's what we're growing into. It's going to take a long time, but we focus on who our head is, how he lived, what he does. And that's where we grow. Anna Jane, last thought.
So what does it mean to speak in truth? Speaking the truth. Like, what does that mean? Like, what is he actually telling us to do?
Yeah. All right. Well, biblically, when I think of truth, a lot of times it's less about facts. Is this true or false? And it's what is true in a healthy sense. Right? Who is speaking truly, sincerely? Yeah, it's hard, right?
You can't define a word with a word.
Right.
You can't say
I know.
The truth is true, because we need to know what that means.
Yeah. I would again go to motivations in this. Is it just, I need to be right, you're wrong, and I need you to be right? Or is it, going back really where we started? I see this, the way that you're talking or acting is not producing the fruit of the Spirit based on what I see. And again, a lot of humility in those kind of conversations versus I know what's right and you're off base here. Look at the fruit. I would say is a big part of that.
So the truth produces fruits of the Spirit. Is that what you're saying?
I think, yeah. I mean, by your fruits you will know them. That's what Jesus said. I think goes back to it. And right, we all are going to have our opinions on what we think is right, and those may be well formed, maybe they're not. And so the humility to listen to others, but to be honest, when we see, this seems like this is harmful, this is hurting, this is how I felt when you did this. Again, coming in love, what's your goal? Maybe that's it too.
Truth and rightness isn't the same.
Yeah. Do you want to be correct, or you want to emphasize what is true? Whatever is excellent, admirable, praiseworthy, right? Philippians 4. That's maybe the same. All right, Gary has something. Yeah, then we'll wrap up.
I think Andrew had something too. Do you want to say real quick?
Well, I mean, I was just gonna say, I think one of the perfect stories of truth and love is Jesus with the woman who's about to be stoned to death. Like he very clearly is like at the end he says, "Hey, maybe don't be living this way," but in the midst of that, like he's loving her exactly where she's at, and protecting her from people who are trying to harm her. And I think that it's like what a humble space for Jesus to be in, to say, I can technically do this, but I'm not going to. And I'm going to protect you from people that are trying to harm you.
Okay.
I think that's
that aspect of truth. One of the words that has helped me, that especially like in John and even in the Greek word, is what is real. Real with what we're talking about here is by faith. And that's what he points us to, that we're growing up in faith. And so therefore, what we know to be real is that we are unified by God. Okay. And so when you speak the truth, when you speak what is real in love, okay, you're trying to bring people together.
Mm-hmm.
You're trying to bring people together. And you're not just giving up on it. Okay? I've done a lot of crazy things that mom and dad were not extremely excited about. That's a minor way to say it. Okay? And they have not in any way, they have talked to me about the truth, about the reality of what this can do and what this will do, but they have never ever in one time that have pulled away any kind of love. We are pursuing the best for you. And so the reality to me is a better word there than true, because we think of truth as Chris started out with facts. That's the way the Western mind thinks. But in what is real about this, you can have a real story of truth and nothing in it is real in the reality of this really happened. Okay? So now we're coming to truth though. Right? Or what is real is what the outcome of that story is. And I know this is a jumble mumble kind of thing, but it's helped me to think about the reality of what Paul is talking about can't be put down in facts. What did Jesus go do when he went into the grave? You can't put that into facts. What we know is he burst the power of death. And so by faith, we live in life. Okay? But that's the reality. That's the truth. And so if somebody wants to live in death, we come to them in love to bring forth life. Okay? And so in love, we come to whatever situation, as he says, and say, this is pulling us apart. This is putting someone else down. And so we keep trying to move in that direction. Does that help at all? Does it make any sense? It's a heavy duty topic that we will continue to move through because we're out of time. But now he begins to make it very real and practical when he says, okay, let's get down. If you're going to accept this and we're going to, okay. And so he says, everybody has to be working on this. Because if you get one joint out of whack, I'm noticing this, I'm getting a little older, and for some reason, every once in a while when I step right here, that goes, nope, not going to step that way. And so it's not working with my body. Okay? And so that's exactly what he points out here. As we strengthen up and every single person becomes in on this truth, we build up stronger, not weaker at the joints. And so if somebody wants to pull away and say, nope, not going to be there, boom. Okay. So that's what maybe hopefully, but we'll move into. Did you have a closing word or prayer?
I'll pray.
All right. Let's close with a prayer.
All right. God, we thank you for the unity that you have created through your Spirit, through your Son and his work to defeat death. I pray that we see the ways that we sometimes work against that, whether we know it or not. I pray that we have the insight to lead and use the gifts that each of us have to grow more and more in this unity that is the true reality that we live in. I thank you for Jesus and pray this in his name. Amen.
Amen.
Just as we're wrapping up, I want to mention, I know I mentioned a couple weeks ago that I'm doing this Doctor of Ministry program, and so part of that's going to be doing some interviewing kind of conversations. So some of those will probably happen during this class time. So as we're getting towards the end of Ephesians, Gary's going to take over on that, and I'll probably pull in some small groups to just have some conversations on Sunday mornings. So you'll hear more about that soon. Just thought I would let you know so you can be prepared. Thanks.
Go in peace.